Okay, so I'm gonna show you how to do online lesson 1, question 1. So when you click this, you'll be taken to my open math, where I wrote these lessons. You want to click start. Now you want to read this very carefully. You get 2 attempts per answer box, right? So in this attempt with this model, you get 2 attempts for that box. You get 2 attempts for that box, right? After you finish the whole problem, if your score on this particular question is lower than you would like, you can reattempt it. And when you reattempt it, you're going to get a different model, different set of numbers. So you have to redo the whole problem, right? So be really careful with these answer boxes, okay? Now, what you want to do is you want to click on this link here, and I have a preloaded model over here, but you notice the numbers are different. So everybody that is going to do this lesson is going to get a slightly different set of numbers, right? This right here is called the demand curve. The reason why it's called the demand curve is because this is the price of a product, and this is the quantity that consumers want to buy, or this is the quantity that consumers are demanding, right? They want one of a product because the price is not too high. Or if the price is low, then they'll want 2 of that product, right? And we know this is the demand curve because the coefficient of Q of our quantity demanded is negative. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this part of the demand curve and paste it right here. And that alters my downward sloping demand curve. Okay. Then I want to do the same thing for the supply curve. Now this over here on the right is the supply curve. And it's a supply curve because it says that it shows a relationship that is positive between prices and quantity. And that quantity happens to be the quantity that is supplied. Now, the reason why supply curves generally slope up is when the price is low, say right here, when the price is low, perhaps only the low cost large firm can make a profit at these low prices. As the price rises, more and more firms will enter the market. And they're entering the market because as the price rises, they can eke out a small profit margin, right? So as the price rises, generally more and more is supplied to a market. Okay. Now, the first question is you're being asked is you need to find the number of burritos. This is the burrito market, right? You need to find the number of burritos that are supplied by firms and demanded by consumers. And you solve demand equal to supply for the Q. So what you could do algebraically is you could set the right-hand side of demand equal to the right-hand side of supply, and you can solve that for Q. But since we have it in Desmos, all we have to do is click on the intersection of the 2 lines. Oh, let me do this. Let me turn off that. We're going to click on the intersection of the 2 lines. The first number is the quantity, and the second number is the price. So the quantity demanded equals the quantity supplied at the market price. And that quantity demanded or quantity supplied is 121.429. I'm going to hit enter, and it says I got it right. Now, the market clearing price, the price at which quantity demanded equals quantity supplied, is 4.19. 4.19. We're going to round it to 2 decimal places. Okay. Now, you got to be really careful in Desmos. Desmos gives you 3 decimal places. It doesn't give you 4. So when this third decimal place is 5, you don't really know if the number that follows, you don't really know if the unrounded number is like 4.8 or 5.2. So if this third number is 5, if it is 5, then you'd round this to 4.19. But if this is really 4.1849, to 3 decimal places, you're going to see a 5, and you might round this to 4.19. So what I'm saying here is if this is a 5 and you think it's a 5 and you round it to 4.19 and it's marked wrong over here, right? It's not marked wrong because this is actually a 6. But if it was a 5, then I'd want to type it as 4.19. It could be the fact that when you round it to 2 decimal places, it could be 4.18. So if you round it and you think your rounding is correct, and you get this marked wrong over here, try going down 1 decimal place from 4.19 to 4.18. Okay. Now, regarding the first burrito supplied, right? The first burrito supplied, I have X here. X is quantity, right? So I have X equal 1. If I increase X, watch what happens. All right. So as I increase my quantity, the difference between the quantity, so the price that is desired by firms is getting closer to the maximum price consumers will want to pay, right? As the good gets more and more scarce, as goods get more and more scarce, the difference between the price consumers want to pay and the price that firms want gets wider, right? So I'm going to set this equal to 1. And you can see that there's a dashed line right here. It's barely visible. I can blow it up a little bit so you can see it. You can see this dashed line here, right? When the quantity is 1, that very first consumer is willing to pay $7.08 for the first burrito supply. Now, who can pay that price? Well, probably somebody with money or somebody that really loves burritos, right? So that's the maximum price that first consumer is willing to pay. The lowest price a firm is willing to accept for that burrito, to produce that burrito and sell it, is 2.018 or 2.02. Right? The supplier needs at least $2.02 for them to make that first burrito and sell it, right? Now, the price that is paid for it is the market price. The market price, remember, is 4.19 in my model, right? Now, think about this first consumer. This first consumer, when there's only one offered, that first consumer is willing to pay up to $7.08, but only has to pay $4.19. So this person is very happy with this, right? They only have to pay $4.19, but they'd be willing to pay up to $7.08, right? So that first person has a surplus, we call it a surplus, of the difference in these two, right? That first consumer surplus is $2.89. Okay, now for the firm, right, to sell that first burrito, the firm will do it for $2.89, right? That's the lowest price they'll sell this burrito, make and sell this burrito. But they get paid $4.19 to do so. So the firm surplus is $1.3. Sorry about that. I actually typed in the wrong number here. The lowest price firms are willing to accept to produce and sell this first burrito is $2.02, but they're getting the market price of $4.19. So the firm surplus is 217. Okay. Now, what about the second burrito? We're going to change X to 2 here. And notice this dashed line moves to the right a little bit, right? For the second burrito, the price that first that second consumer is willing to pay is $7.05. So I'm going to change this to $7.05. The supplier of that second burrito will supply that second burrito and sell that second burrito if the price is at least $2.04. So I'm going to change this to 4. So the maximum price the second consumer is willing to pay is $7.05. The minimum price that the firm is willing to accept is $2.04. And this kind of makes sense, right? If you ever bought anything on eBay, or you ever bought anything at a yard sale, on eBay, it used to be an auction, right? And you'd want to sell something. You have to list the reserve price. The reserve price is the lowest price you're willing to part with the product, right? Right? And you set your reserve price, and then people will bid on this thing in an auction. And if the last bidder exceeds your reserve price, then the transaction's made. And this right here is the winning price of the auction. And this down here is the reserve price, the seller's reserve price, right? And as long as there is a difference, then the exchange occurs, right? The price, again, that is paid by the consumer or received by the seller is $4.19. That's the market price. The consumer surplus is not as big as it once was because the second consumer is really willing not to pay. They're not willing to pay as much as that first consumer, right? So the consumer surplus dropped 2.86. The firm surplus rose to 2.15. Okay. Now, what about the third burrito? We're going to change this to 3. Right? For that third burrito, the third person in line for there's only 3 burritos supplied. So the third person in line is willing to pay $7.03 for the burrito. The firm is willing to sell and produce that burrito if the price is at least $2.05. Right? So the price the third consumer is willing to pay is $7.03. The firm is willing to accept at least, it has to be at least $2.05. And of course, the consumer only has to pay $4.19. The firm receives $4.19. So you can think of it as this third consumer winning, right? Because they're willing to pay much more than what they have to pay, what they get to pay. And the firm wins because they're willing to sell the burrito for $2.05, but they collect $4.19, right? So both have surplus. The consumer surplus for that third item sold is $3.84, and the firm surplus is $2.14. Now, regarding the burrito that the marginal consumer buys, the marginal consumer is the one that's indifferent. The marginal supplier is indifferent. A marginal consumer is indifferent between making the purchase and not making the purchase. Why? Because the price they're willing to pay, the most they're willing to pay, equals the market price. That's the marginal consumer. So the marginal consumer is this, you can think of this as in thousands, right? Maybe there's 121 429 consumers in this market. And this is the last, or the marginal consumer. And the price along the demand curve is $4.19, which equals the market price. Right? So that consumer has zero surplus. The marginal consumer is going to have zero surplus, right? Same thing with a marginal firm. The marginal firm is indifferent between producing and selling a product or not, right? Why? Because the lowest price that firm is willing to accept to make this many burritos is $419, or sorry, $4.19, which is equal to the market price. So that marginal firm has zero surplus. And they're indifferent between being in this market and not being in the market. Same thing with the consumer, right? Now, consumer surplus can be computed by summing up all these, right? So consumer surplus, let me put in another line here. I'm going to put in a line at the market price of $4.19. Okay, so this is the market price, right? And the market price separates, without the market price in here, this big triangle is what we call total surplus. But when I graph the market price in there, it splits the total surplus into consumer surplus up here and firm surplus down here. And notice that the consumer surplus is a little bigger than the firm surplus. And it's because demand is more vertical. Demand is relatively more inelastic than is supply. Okay, so this is the consumer surplus. And the consumer surplus is the sum of the differences in this height from here up to here. That's the consumer surplus of the first consumer. That's the consumer surplus of the second consumer, of the third, of the fourth, of the fifth, of the sixth, of the seventh, of the eighth, of the ninth, of the 100th, right? This height difference. Notice that for the 100th burrito sold, the consumer surplus has shrank, right? And it continues to shrink as the quantity supplied and demanded increase. Right? So consumer surplus is the difference to this vertical height here, right? That vertical height difference is the consumer surplus of the 118th burrito served, right? So we can sum all those vertical heights, or we can measure the consumer surplus by the area of this triangle, right? And I've done that for you. The area of the triangle is 176.68. That's the area of this triangle here. And the same can be done for the firm surplus, right? Same can be done for the firm surplus, right? As the quantity supplied increases, right, the vertical distance between this point, which is at height of 419, the market price, and this point here, the price along the supply curve, as the quantity increases, that distance decreases. So we can sum up all of these vertical heights, or we can calculate the area of this triangle, which I've already done right here. Okay. I've done that for you, right? So now we're going to get to the efficiency argument. If consumer surplus measures the total benefit that accrues to consumers for participating in this market voluntarily, and firm surplus measures the benefit that accrues to firms for participating in this market, total benefit to buyers and firms is maximized when the quantity of burritos equals what? So remember, the market quantity that is supplied and demanded is 121.25. Okay. So if the quantity is only, say, 49, then the total surplus is this upper trapezoid plus this lower trapezoid, right? As the quantity increases, the total surplus, this upper trapezoid plus this lower trapezoid, gets bigger. Now the total surplus, this upper trapezoid plus this lower trapezoid, is quite large. And efficiency, a market is efficient. A market is efficient when that's maximized, when this area is maximized, and that occurs at 121.25. So at 121.25, this trapezoid is turned into a triangle, and this trapezoid is turned into a triangle, right? So the market said it'd be efficient when the quantity is equal, in my case, to 121.25, right? Where the demand meets supply. And when that happens, you add the area of the upper triangle with the area of the lower triangle. So I'm going to copy these two. What I like about decimals is I can do the math in decimals too. I'm going to add these two up. Total surplus is 309. 309.65. I'm adding these two numbers up, right? Efficiency is achieved when the demand price and the supply price both equal what? Well, at a lower quantity, when total surplus is not maximized, we have a trapezoid here and a lower trapezoid here. At a lower quantity, the price on the demand curve and the price on the supply curve are not equal, right? As we increase the quantity, this price and this price get closer and closer and closer to each other, right? Now the price is $4.48, and the supply price is $3.96, right? As we keep increasing the quantity and total surplus is increasing, when total surplus is maximized, the demand price and the supply price are both $4.19. And the quantity demanded and quantity supplied are both, again, equal to 121.65. I think that should be 3 decimal places. Yeah. We'll do a quantity demand and we'll do 121.429. Three decimal places. Okay. That's the efficiency argument. In other words, free markets maximize the benefits that accrue to consumers and firms for voluntarily engaging in commerce, right? In these exchanges, money exchange for product. Now, suppose politicians say that the market clearing price is too high because poor people cannot afford a $4.19 burrito. If the government caps the price of burritos at $3.10, so this price is too high for poor people, right? If the government caps the price of burritos at $3.10, what's going to happen? So let's go up here. I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to come up here to the line 3. The line is red. I'm going to change this to the maximum price of $3.10. right? Right. So I'm imposing this price ceiling, right? When I type the $3.10 in here, it's illegal now to sell burritos for a price that is above $3.10. Mindful Math automatically draws in the price ceiling, right? So my graphs now match Desmos and Mindful Math, right? Okay, when the price ceiling is imposed, the quantity supplied is now what? Well, at this maximum price of $3.10, firms will only sell 61.111 units of burritos, right? And the quantity demanded is what? Well, at this really low price, a bunch of new people want to buy burritos at this now government mandated low price, 166.667. The difference in these values is called what? Well, this is what people want to buy, the quantity that people want to buy, and this is the quantity that is supplied. So the quantity demand is much larger than this quantity supply. So we call that a shortage. The equity intervention does what? So if I now set this at 61.11, right? The equity intervention does what to total surplus? Well, we've eliminated this commerce right here, this triangle that is made by these three dots. We've eliminated this commerce here, right? So our total surplus is from this point up to here, down to here, and then over to here. So this is our new firm surplus, and this right here is our new consumer surplus. So the equity intervention has done what? It decreases total surplus. The people that populate the demand curve from this point down to this point, the people that populate this part of the demand curve are poor people who are willing only to pay between $4.19 and $3.10. They weren't engaging in commerce before the price ceiling. They're not engaging in commerce now, right? Because only 61 burritos are being supplied. So this price ceiling does not affect them at all. They weren't buying burritos before, and they're not buying burritos now. What the price ceiling has done is it eliminated the middle class. The people that populate the demand curve between these 2 points are middle class people who are willing only to pay up to $5.63 to $4.19, right? These people have been eliminated from commerce. The people that remain in the market are rich people, or people that really, 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 really love burritos and are willing to pay a lot of money for them, right? So you can think of this trapezoid here as being the consumer surplus of people who can afford to pay much higher prices for burritos. And they generally are going to be wealthy people like LeBron James or Bill Gates. They can pay the higher prices, right? So their consumer surplus has increased, right? The firm surplus has decreased. The firms that populated this part of the supply curve have been eliminated from this marketplace. And now only the large producer with low cost, lower cost of production remain in the market, right? So we've eliminated the marginal producers and the marginal consumers. And if you don't have 100% on this, there's a button up here that you're going to see right here. Get a similar question, and you can redo it, and that'll give you a different demand and supply curve and a different maximum price.